Welcome back to Iron Culture presented by Mass, folks. I look like I'm rolling solo here, but what you don't know is my boy is in the shadows, supporting me in the back room, ready to jump out if anyone should do something that would threaten Iron Culture. I've got Trex in the producer seat, and more so, I've got two fabulous new guests. One is truly new to the Iron Culture Mass universe, but one has been here before. We're going to start with just getting the old guy out of the way. I mean, he's old because he's the same age as me. But in all seriousness, I am very pleasured to have Mr. Universe, 3DMJ coach, the best hair, arguably, at least in Colorado, in the natural bodybuilding scene. Alberto Nuñez, my brother from another mother, back on the podcast. How you doing, man?
Good, man. I thought we agreed on Galactus, but I'll take Mr. Universe.
Hey, you can be a world eater anytime, and the Avengers will come for you, and you will just swat those flies away with the massive lats that you have grown in the last few years. I'm good with that.
Right on. It's always a pleasure being here, man, and we appreciate you letting us, talk about this sport that keeps us up at night, man. Like, for better or for worse. So thank you, man. Appreciate you.
It's a pleasure. No. And then, of course, for the first time, we have WNBF Pro, WNBF UK president, Steff Noble, well-known coach, excellent athlete, and just all around great gal. Welcome to the podcast.
What an introduction. Thanks very much, Eric, for having me. And, as an avid listener to both of you guys and following you along for years, it's a privilege to be on. And I look forward to a really great conversation with you both.
Well, thank you very much. No, this is going to be good. So what happened last time? And I got to give you guys a little backstory here. Is I get on the podcast, we're going live. It's me and Trex. Trex, ostensibly, to throw out one of my classic big words that's unnecessary, which just means basically supposedly, but it makes me feel better about my intellect. Ostensibly says that he's a big natural bodybuilding fan, right? He even supposedly competed, supposedly was a pro. And big natural bodybuilding supporter. And I want to do a recap of Worlds. And he says, hold on, Eric, I gotta talk to you about this before we go live. You got to keep the segment short. And anytime you spend talking about natural bodybuilding, I've got to be able to talk about college football. So it forced me into a position where I couldn't give it the airtime it needed. Because I didn't want to have a 3-hour-long podcast where I talked about Worlds for an hour and a half, because I could. And then Trex talked about college football. The good news, though, is that in one of our subsequent live episodes, apparently some team played in Ohio against some other team. It didn't go the way Trex liked it. So he has now canceled college football for Iron Culture, which is good. So now I've been given the freedom because of this fortuitous loss to some team that touches some oblong object, and I don't know how they do things, but I like the combine. They got the 225 bench to failure. That's to me is the only real part of football that counts as a sport. If there's a barbell involved at some point, either in the training or on the platform or on the stage, that is a sport in Eric Helms' book. So nonetheless, fortuitous events. Trex is now a producer. He's not allowed to step in and say anything. This is happening. You guys are here. We're going to be doing a recap of Worlds, a real sport of natural bodybuilding, not something like quote unquote college football. I mean, if it's in college, is it a sport? Aren't these kids supposed to be studying? I'll leave it at that. So let's talk about the Super Bowl of natural bodybuilding, what just passed, WNBF Worlds. We had the return of Babacar. And we also had a huge tip of the cap, a farewell to one of the bodybuilding greats, one of the people who has made bodybuilding continue in the form it has and grown and has a huge presence on the East Coast. And at her time was one of the best female natural bodybuilders on the planet. Nancy Andrews stepped away, is kind of officially retiring. And they announced that. And, I think her lifetime achievement is something that is worth noting. Steff, I want to start with you. What was your impression of WNBF Worlds this year and the competitive level?
Well, I think, having now been at Worlds for numerous years, I think the first one I went to was 2017 and, back and forth before becoming a promoter for WNBF UK. I've seen, the level rise every single year, as you guys most likely have. And I truly believe that, the weekend just passed was a huge celebration for natural bodybuilding. Presently, new athletes in the game, fresh blood coming in. Past, obviously, athletes, working their way through the ranks in a celebration of the successes they're having over the years and coming back and competing and taking those titles. And then the return of, big bodybuilders, like, of course, Bada, and just obviously having a lot of encouraging athletes support natural bodybuilding, and WNBF recognizing that and seeing them coming back into the game. So from a competitive standpoint, I think it was very varied. And I think each of the classes, both from a male and female perspective, were very deep competitively. So from a first look, it really excited me actually about the growth of WNBF alone, but natural bodybuilding is now being recognized, I think, a lot more seriously by a lot of competitors, both young and old. So that's my first impression. Yeah.
So one thing I would like to do, Steff, is because I think some people, I want to talk about this a bit. We'll touch on Worlds, but I want to give people a little more background too on the UK, because it has a pretty cool natural bodybuilding scene that I think people in the US just probably don't fully get. We'll talk about that in a bit. But could you give us a little more on your personal history with natural bodybuilding? When did you get into it? How long have you been involved? I know you're a coach as well. So give us a little bit more about your experience as a natural athlete.
Yeah, sure. So I started competing in 2012, and I've had various competitive experiences across pretty much all of the natural federations which have been available to me in the UK. I came from a competitive dance background, and the blend of sort of the performing, I suppose the arts element of showcasing your physique on stage, coupled with that athletic discipline, focus, try to get your physique into the absolute best condition it can possibly be in. The two it was like a light bulb moment. It was like, this is something I'm passionate about from a performance and an artistic point of view, at the same time as my love, of course, at the time I was a personal trainer, I was training, and I was really interested in getting my body to challenge myself to get to certain goals. So the natural bodybuilding, or the bodybuilding pursuit, became like everything for me. And I think I was very lucky that I was in a gym where natural bodybuilders were. That was the first thing I'd probably say, is I was exposed to local natural bodybuilding shows. At the time, it was called Natural Physique Association. The NPA is still here in the UK. You probably know a little bit about them. They were like the backbone of the sport in the UK for a long time, and had their own affiliations throughout the years. And that's where I started in 2012. It was in a small show. It was a Yorkshire Championships in England. And the kind of passion, I suppose, the love connected there and then, loved it, and thought, this is something I could really do. This is something I could probably go reasonably far in. And I felt like my structure lent itself reasonably well. I was already quite focused with my own, my physical pursuits, if you like. And that's where it all began for me. I then went on to compete with BNBF, UKDFBA, and took 3 British titles across all 3 of the federations, MPA, BNBF, and UKDFBA. Started the process for the next, what would become 7 years, to work up towards my DFAC Pro card and my WNBF Pro card across those stages. And I think I just learned so much. And my sort of premise going into every show with every federation was, what do I love about it? But what are the things that don't sit right with me about it as well? And I was always quite aware of the positives of the sport, but also each federation's, I suppose, negatives as well. And for me, it was a journey of vote with your feet, compete where you feel works for you, and morally, does their, I suppose, vision for what they want for their athletes connect with me as an athlete at the time? And that's what I've always thought through the years. And to cut a very long story short, the WNBF and where I took, the pro card there and started to completely just throw myself into their mission, I guess, with the drug testing, with understanding what they want to give the athlete, the accolades of the sport, the athletes that were on stage at WNBF Worlds. That just became the absolute goal in every way. So hopefully that gives you a short snapshot into what has been probably about a 10 and a half year journey to this point of my competitive, from my competitive standpoint.
No, absolutely. And I think it's, in many ways, there's similarities between the UK and the US scene, in so much as we have a lot of federations. And the difference, I think, in the UK is that just the geographical size is a little smaller, and and you may correct me on this, but it seems like we have a lot more infighting turmoil and maybe less willingness to kind of all recognize one another in the natural bodybuilding scene in the US. But it's, in my experience in the UK, it's quite common to go, oh yeah, I'm going to do the natural bodybuilding circuit. And they don't mean one federation. They mean they're going to do NPA, UKDFBA, WNBF UK. They're going to do DFAC. They're going to do, even now PCA is jumping into having some natural natural shows on like kind of like the NPC is doing. While that's quite common in competitors in the US, until you maybe plant your stake in the ground with one certain pro organization. But the organizations themselves kind of are like, let's not pretend the other ones exist. We're the only ones here. Just compete with us. And a lot of them have a not so great history with one another. And you can see different organizations come and go and be affiliated with each other. And, there's old beefs that go back to the 90s in some cases between these folks. Mm-hmm. So I don't know do you think that's an accurate comparison between the two regions?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think, it's something I've struggled with a long time, and I've actually made my peace with a lot of it too, since becoming a promoter 4 years ago. And my initial want was to try and have more synergy across the organizations in the UK, because in some way, just being completely frank about it, we're all very passionate about it. There's a lot of emotion involved about the sport and, the way you do things and why you do things. And I always nod my hat to the other federations in the UK, because without those platforms, without them being able to give, the opportunities I had, I wouldn't be in a position now to be able to give back to the sport in a way that I think will benefit the whole sport, not just the federation itself. But there is a fracturedness between the organizations, which is giving, in my opinion, more opportunity for the fragmentation for sort of other federations. We see the likes of independent federations popping up now that are just doing standalone shows, great production, big, things like that going on. With in my ideal world, a conversation to sit around the table, which I'm sure you guys have spoken about before as well, but being able to have, we might not have personal agreements in how or who we like and don't like, but we all share common interest in bettering the sport, providing for the athlete, making sure we collaborate and talk very sensibly on the drug testing. I share my drug testing results with every other federation in the UK. I don't get responses from that, but I do it in the benefit of trying to, make sure that we are synergized on the most important thing, that is, what we're trying to do, making sure that everything is fair. So it's a complicated conversation, and it's a deep rooted one, because, you've got new promoters, or I suppose fresher promoters, or have different viewpoints coming in. I'm probably in that newer camp from 4 years ago starting in. You've got deep-rooted passions from the dawn of natural bodybuilding, how it all came about, the connections, the relationships that have been built, which also need respect. But there has to be a shift with the times. And for me, natural bodybuilding will continue to grow with more collaborative conversations and more put the personals aside and move forward for the sport as a whole. So where you begin on kind of picking that apart is, it's difficult, but I think as long as we're having conversations that respect both old thinking and new thinking, that's where those kind of progressions can happen.
It's so great to hear you say all that, Steff, because, I have been vocal on this. Most recently I was actually on the Longevity Muscle podcast where I went in depth in my thoughts on this stuff. But it's easy for me to say that when I am simply an athlete and a coach. It's in the interest of an athlete to have as many competitive opportunities as they can. It's in the interest of a coach to be able to put their athletes into many organizations. So the incentives are aligned for us to, I say coaches and athletes when I say us, to look for the most collaborative outcome. And I think it's harder to see that when you're a promoter, and in some ways it doesn't just feel like, but it can be a zero-sum game. If someone else puts on a show and it's within a certain amount of time from yours, and if they're promoting why athletes should do their show, they're at least implicitly saying, and you shouldn't do this other one. And when you've got a lot of different splintering and different national organizations, and seemingly they're popping up all the time in different regions, I understand how we've gotten to this place, but we're at a tipping point now where I think everyone's become aware of the fact that there actually are more people not taking steroids and interested in building their body than the other way around. And there is actually a potential lucrative business model to come out of natural bodybuilding. And as we'll talk about later in this podcast, there are forces at play that we need to adapt to and I say we collectively as natural bodybuilding, or it's going to be a very different landscape and one we may have less agency in, autonomy in, and just might not like as much, and may not represent the values of the sport that we are trying to promote. I'll leave it at that. That's a seed. I'm planting a seed here, folks, for what we come to later. But I do want to get, Berto, I want to go over to you. Like I said, relatively momentous Super Bowl of natural bodybuilding. We had some pretty wild battles, some pretty impressive talent come in. What were your thoughts on WNBF Worlds this year? Kind of first impressions.
Yeah, I mean, it continues to, I think, get deeper. I think the pros, because, we go back and we fantasize about like this world and like this overall, and how we wish some of these athletes were, competing today, or even athletes like a long time ago that are like way beyond their pride. It's like, how would like Dave Gooden do nowadays, right? So the pros, they're just pros. Like they're always going to be quite good, but it's the amateurs where you're doing a good job, or the sport is doing a good job collectively in keeping these athletes. Well, actually, the athletes are doing a good job searching for the information, because it's still the Wild West out there when it comes to deciphering what's valid and what isn't. So that's what I was most impressed with. Is it even like second call outs in all classes? It's like, whoa, like, I mean, it is Worlds after all. So you have like the best of the best from all over the planet coming together and meeting in this like one place. But still, it wasn't like that years ago. So that's usually how you can tell that, hey, like the sport's heading in the right direction. If this is taking place with these amateurs, scary part is like there's some like 14, 15, 16-year-olds like right now that are off to these tremendous starts, and we'll see who they are, a few years from now. So that's exciting, because, I mean, above anything, like I'm a fan. Like I love major sports. I like college football just like Trex. However, like this to me it means more than the Super Bowl. It means more than the Olympics even. Like I am there in my seat. I'm like, I've been waiting for this all year, and to know that it's only going to get better, that that the next gen is heading in the right direction. That's very comforting. And that's why, everything you guys said is so important, because we need to have platforms available, places where these athletes do compete and that honor their hard work.
Mm-hmm. Well said. No, I think, I echo that 100%. And just to give one acknowledgement of how far the amateurs come, have come. I'm seeing it especially on the women's side. I think we're seeing a leveling up of the competitors that is really cool to see. I talked about this a bit when I did have my 15 minutes of fame that I negotiated alongside college football with Trex. I discussed from Spain, Amor Fernandez. I judged her at a regional show when I was traveling to Europe, and I got the opportunity to judge for WNBF Spain, and she blew my mind. I was like, whoa. And that show was small enough, she couldn't technically win a pro card. So she came to Worlds, and she won not only her pro card, winning the amateur women's bodybuilding title, but then won the overall. And the same thing happened last year in 2023 with Natalie Hayes. And Natalie Hayes was back this year, and Natalie did an amazing job, but I think she placed third. So it just goes to show you the standard is elevating very quickly broadly, like you said, Berto, across the whole sport. But the women's side, it seems like people are really bringing it, which is a cool thing to see. So yeah, anyway, Amor was, I think this might've been the second time we've seen someone win ever the amateur overall and go on to win the pro overall in their division. First Natalie Hayes and now Amor. And to see that's gotten quite competitive, Natalie is now vying for a top 3 spot, not just what a lot of people thought last year. Oh yeah, she keeps coming in condition like that. It's her title to take. I was like, okay, well, there's people coming out of the woodworks who are just incredible. So I think that's an excellent example to that. Stephanie, I would love to get your thoughts on, is women's physique sport on the rise? Is women's bodybuilding coming back? Where are we at?
Yeah, I absolutely think it is. I mean, I know that I can speak for WNBF UK, and I've obviously spoken to quite a few of the other affiliates within WNBF as well. But where is women's bodybuilding or the more muscular, conditioned look really starting to rise? And certainly we're seeing that in Australia and those parts. We're seeing that in Spain. We're seeing that certainly from the UK. We have a love for the harder, more muscular look in the UK. We like to really push for that. And I think we need to encourage, and I certainly know we're doing a lot of this in education side back home, but we need to educate more women on moving away from the fear of getting too muscular, I guess, or the worry about being too densely muscular or not wanting to go into these more muscular categories because they're seen as maybe more masculine or etc., and start to get them interested in what that means for your confidence, your strength, how you feel. And I think a lot more women are seeing the enjoyment of heavy, hard training and pushing for that look. We had very deep female classes in figure and fit body at the UK Supernaturals. I know that Leah over in Australia has shared the same dialogue with me. There's a lot of really strong Australian, more muscular women coming through. The likes of Amor, of course, from Spain. That was, wow. I mean, if that doesn't show you what's possible as a natural female bodybuilder, I don't know what does. It's incredibly inspiring. So we're seeing a huge rise of that in certain countries. But from having the exposure to the circuit and being able to judge at multiple events across the globe this year, when we move over to Asia, that's still something that we're, starting to kind of have a conversation with more women about. So, it's not as popular. A lot of that's from cultural or social aspects as well, as to why maybe they're not coming into those classes as much. But we're seeing a little bit more on the rise, and there's a bit more tenacity there when they start to speak to people, who have done it, from especially showcasing that at Worlds. A lot of the girls are talking together and they're building bonds, they're building more community for it. So yeah, I only see it as growing. I hope it continues to. I'll certainly do my part on that as well.
No, absolutely. And you're a great ambassador for it. And that is absolutely something I want to talk about as well, is the fact that there are still regional differences in, despite the fact that we have the World Wide Web. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's a growing thing. It's been around for a while now. It connects people through the information superhighway, which it's kind of like an actual highway, but it's digital bytes. So I think we got to keep supporting the internet if we want to see this thing work and last. So that's why we're doing this podcast live, but on the line instead of doing it as I originally planned, as meeting together in an auditorium. We couldn't get that booked out well enough. So hopefully this whole internet podcast thing is going to work out. But yeah, despite the internet connecting all of us, when I was judging in Taiwan, it was a very, very different experience than it was judging in Spain, Italy. I have judged in the US, and I've also judged in Australia and New Zealand. And the regional differences sometimes are subtle, but sometimes they're impressive. Like in Taiwan, for example, there's an expectation of having kind of this men's fitness class that isn't one of the official WNBF main classes. We come out there in jeans with our shirt off and like dream tan on, you know? And by far, the next biggest class after that on the men's side is men's physique. And there are people in men's physique who are just like, bro, you just need to put on the Speedos and you got 2 titles. You got 2 pro cards. Just as an example, the shortest class of the men's physique in the most recent WNBF Taiwan had 39 competitors in it. The WNBF New Zealand show had around 39 competitors in it. The show, not the height class within the amateurs division, right? So it blew my mind. And like you said, there on the women's side, huge number of bikini competitors. And then after that, it falls off a cliff in terms of participation. So yeah, I would really like to see that change a bit. I think obviously it's cultural. Obviously it is just kind of what's done. And, you know, when you don't share a common language, even being on the internet together doesn't necessarily influence things as well. But being in person together at Worlds and being able to bring athletes together, and then they go home and kind of bring those cultural elements and create a little more synergy across the regions, I think is a really positive thing. And one of the things that I appreciate most about this most recent arc of the WNBF, and big shout out to Bob and Tina I know they made a huge push for this, is trying to create much more of an international scene. And that is actually where my hopes lie in the WNBF, because I think that is a lot more important than many people realize. You see it if you coach, because if you coach internationally, you see it if you judge or if you're involved in the organization. But I think it's just that, let's say, a US-based natural bodybuilder, you may not fully appreciate the importance of having an international natural bodybuilding federation thrive like this and be interconnected, because it gives us certain opportunity, legitimacy, and the ability to grow in ways that you normally wouldn't anticipate, and to get new, fresh perspectives. Steff, like you were saying earlier, that kind of fractured way that things are in the US with all the history and the promoters, if you take that same attitude and you were to bring it to New Zealand or Australia, where we do have 4 or 5 different kind of dominant federations, they're also all very collaborative. They understand they're dealing with a smaller population. There's a season A, season B. It's not like there's shows throughout the year. That attitude there would be very clearly harmful to everyone involved. It would be a sinking tide, lowering all ships. And I ultimately, I think it is actually quite harmful in the US as well, but it's just so much more obvious if you were to start doing that. I think it's probably true in the UK. So it's kind of this thing where you don't know how things could be until you get out of your own kind of little mini worldview. Good. And Berto, I want to go to you now. I do want to talk a little more about Worlds a bit, but I have a question now that I've created this topic of, do you think most American natural bodybuilders understand how different natural bodybuilding is internationally, and how different scenes can look pretty different? Or I feels like in the States, your expectation is I'm going to go to a small high school, and I'm going to be critical here, I'm sorry. There's going to be a canvas banner. The people are going to show up with shop lights, and there are of course exceptions, and this doesn't describe most WNBF shows, but just natural bodybuilding generally. The production quality is going to be hopefully in the 2000s, but potentially from the 90s. Stage pictures are going to be, your results maybe somewhere on a random Facebook page, but they may just be gone to the ether, after whoever posted on Instagram. That my impression is that the expectations are probably too low, and no one is actually thinking that big for natural bodybuilding in the States. Do you think I'm wrong? Am I just become jaded now that I've been in New Zealand for 12 years or what?
No, I think you're absolutely correct there. I think when we started, we just kind of accepted that because that's all we knew. Our first show was in a high school in Oakland, California. Like in one of those parts of Oakland, California, is that right?
Oakland Tech, baby.
Oakland Tech, right? And, we thought that was just kind of it. And we thought, in that auditorium where the Muscle Mayhem is like, where it's at every year, we were like, I was like, man, I feel like I almost don't deserve this. Like, this ain't that big of a deal. But in other places, that's the one thing, like, it's a spectacle. It's a show. As an athlete, this is one thing I did notice from the athletes that, came from other countries, when they got to this show here in Boston, they were kind of like, oh, wow. Like right away, like the lighting was something that, we, and you and I, we just kind of, I don't know, to us, it's like football, right? Where there's like weather and that's just what you deal with. Like, oh, it's snowing today, go play ball. And I guess when I saw that, like my perspective right away, it was like, cause I've been to this venue before, it was like, all right, yeah, we're playing in snow, that's just what it is. But to a lot of the other athletes, it's just kind of a shock, right? So yeah, it's important that we kind of broaden our horizons a little bit and see what everyone else is doing. And I know if I was a promoter here in the States, like I would try to, see, what they're doing over here in Germany, what they're doing over here in Taiwan and like take those ideas and run with them. Because that's there's just a big difference when it comes to, I think now more than ever, cat's out the bag. Cause unlike you and I, when we started, it's like athletes see this. And you want to feel, respected because, man, prepping is hard. It's many, many months of your life where you're kind of waking up with this purpose, and to kind of have something mildly chaotic and unorganized, like on your big day, just kind of, it can take the fun out of it.
So from your perspective, you were able to see, at least among some of the international athletes who are used to competing in, I mean, sometimes it's quite impressive. Like when it's actually WNBF Spain was amazing. Roberto knows how to put on a show. I tell you what, the WNBF Italy show in Milan that I did is a small venue, didn't have LED screens, but the lighting was great. The organization was amazing. There is a lot of really good work being done. And to both of you guys mentioning earlier, some of these big unaffiliated shows, like the big ANBF show, and I'm not expecting everyone to be at that standard because they had literal drones flying around the heads of the competitors, taking footage. I think that is amazing. And there are some shows independently that are run in the US that are attached to big fitness expos like the Mr. America. So the production standard has gotten really high, and I can totally understand why someone who's coming from a country where the standard's a little bit higher in terms of the promotion and production quality comes to a world championships and is a little disappointed, it sounds like. Berto, do you think that's an accurate view? And I'm not trying to be super critical here. I just think it's good for us to kind of be clear. Like the standard at WNBF Worlds wasn't necessarily to the same regional standard that some of the athletes were used to in their home country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the perk is that it's here in the United States and they can get all the great junk food they've seen online, right? But so that's the perk, right? It's a big deal to a lot of folks to come here to the U.S. So yeah, that's only a part of the package, right? Like the other part is like, hey, the show segment, like, what is this? So yeah, it's almost embarrassing to me as an American, because it's I know we can do better. That's all.
I feel the same way. I wouldn't say that Australia or New Zealand is that much better than the US. I think it's actually quite similar. So when the shows that come out stand out, they blow people's minds. Like the WNBF Australia show that was put on where I got to compete and turn pro. It was amazing. Big screen like above us showing us the like what was going on. Great venue, amazing lighting, production quality, MC, top to bottom. And they actually brought in a lot of the team from WNBF Taiwan to help with that. So like that's the kind of collaboration. I saw that and I was like, oh, this is the way it needs to be. This is it moving forward, working together, coming together, and utilizing all that. And I think it would be. I'm excited for that future in the WNBF, and I hope that is where the direction we're going. Another really, I've never been to shows in the UK, but everything I've seen online, Steff, it seems like those standards are lifting pretty rapidly in the UK. Is that an accurate representation? What are your thoughts on the promotion quality, production quality, and how things are going in the UK and in Europe?
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys have to come next time. I'm going to get a segment just for you two. Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I think it's a very fine line between overproduction and not enough as well. Like, I think, I absolutely agree that from an affiliate standpoint, certainly a big portion of what I try and do is from being an athlete, putting myself in that position, thinking about, what I'd want as an athlete now in such a social and visible world. Let's be honest, the athlete wants as much prestige online as they do on the stage and what they're kind of doing this whole hard work for. And I think it's finding a way to engage in the production that gives them that quality off stage as well. And I think a lot of athletes now want to feel like stars within their community, right? They want to be on the social platform. I like to provide them with, an off-stage interview straight away when they come off stage so that they can capture that moment from how they're feeling to right through to then the engagement after the event of them seeing themselves in high quality production that they can share with their own online platforms, maybe their coaches, maybe they want to use this as their own material. So that kind of stuff can help give the athlete, not just the athlete who maybe takes a top 5 placing, but give the athlete who is not in that, top 5, something tangible to come away with and work with, whether it's for their own data perspective to get better, whether it's, something that they can share in their growth of their platform, whatever they're doing. And I think that stuff now is gold for athletes. Wow. And it's something that as a promoter, I really encourage other affiliates and myself and like my peers all speak about this. If you have the ability to do so, because it does cost money, it's a lot of money, this stuff, to put into the background. And that's something a lot of people don't realize that, they want all the production, but we've got to be able to fund this stuff too. We've got to have an ability to grow and then provide. And that's what we're focused on. But it is putting time and effort into that. We need it. The athlete needs to, exactly as you just said, Berto, feel recognised for their hard work with a great experience on stage. Right from the basics, your lighting, your photography, right through to potentially those jazzy things that we can potentially add into the mix if we have the asset and wherewithal to do so. Because some affiliates, I'm lucky, I've got a very strong community in the UK. I've got a lot of great support, a lot of great athletes coming in and supporting the WNBF and seeing that journey as where they want to go. So it does give me a bit of a buffer to be able to offer more. Whereas if you're a smaller promoter or perhaps not as quite established yet, or maybe in a community that or a culture that isn't as engaged yet, they just don't quite have the resource to be able to go to that extra level. So it's about the pacing of it, but there's no getting away from the fact that this is what everybody wants. From a promoter standpoint, an athletic standpoint, the athlete. And internally within, the WNBF, these are conversations we have all the time now. These are very important conversations to better the global organisation. And you hit the nail on the head, Eric, with talking about being a truly international organization. We are so proud of that. The affiliates and the promoters, we feel very synergized at the moment in terms of the dialogues we're having. There's a lot of support. Bob and Tina are doing an insane job at now listening and really growing with some of our views, and we're really respecting what they have now built for us all to be able to do this. So, it's that collaboration, and it's slowly making sure that the direction is done properly, because there is stuff, in the background, there is a lot that you have to make sure it works, make sure these are things that can be, unraveled across all of the affiliates and work tangibly, not that one affiliate can do this and another can do Y. We do need to have a sense of synergy. So these are really important conversations, and I think it's very easy when you see the visible and the promotion online to go, why aren't we doing this or why aren't we doing that? But there's got to be a journey to get to that point, and some of us can do that a lot quicker than others. And so it's just that kind of rollout and the balance of getting to where I think the majority of us, if not all of us, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of WNBF here, but that where the majority of us want this to go in order to ensure that WNBF continues to have that prestige that we know it has. And I'm going on and on about this here, but hopefully that gives a bit of insight.
No, it does. And you make some really good points about the resources available to certain promoters and what they can do in their region. Because even in areas where natural bodybuilding is popular, like the US, it is very much a crabs in a barrel situation sometimes. And I know some really, really good promoters who are doing everything they can, but not able to bring the kind of standard that is the norm in other regions. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're doing anything wrong. It just means they're in a rough spot. So I certainly don't want to give anyone the impression of like, hey, listen, if you don't got an LED screen, at least 100 competitors, backstage interviews, and a live stream, you're doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. But I think we also have to acknowledge that from a pure, like kind of harsh perspective, the market doesn't care. You know, if there are opportunities for people to have a live stream with commentators, an LED screen, get interviewed afterwards, have their results visible on a web stage so they can actually know where they placed, see pictures, and see the judges' sheets directly printed out with transparency. And that becomes more and more and more the standard. Not doing that becomes more obvious than doing it. And it makes you look like you're not standing out. So I think ultimately we just need to be aware of that. And that's a good thing, right? If we're all trying to shoot for that, because that legitimizes things. And I just go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that one of the things that I certainly, whenever I'm at a Worlds event, for example, and one of the things that I think WNBF continues to hold really high is sometimes the production element can take away from the quality of natural bodybuilding itself, like the athlete on stage itself. Mm-hmm. And there's a simplicity in natural bodybuilding that I feel sometimes we forget, because there's the athletes come on, there's a judging criteria, there's a process, there's a system, there's a whole way of doing it. And it's exciting, yes, and we want to kind of, celebrate natural bodybuilding as a whole, but just that basic classic natural bodybuilder standing on stage with the silhouette, with the clarity behind, all of that. I think we've kind of lost a little bit of that. And I think at Worlds level, whilst I agree, some of the production elements we can grow, definitely. I think there is still a classic understated acknowledgement of natural bodybuilding, clearly, just simplicity. And I just wanted to make a point on that, because that's something I think is valid, is still to remember, the whole point of this, the judging of a physique against its peers on stage. And the evolvement is awesome, like anything, but just reminding ourselves of that is a nice simplicity, I guess, as well.
No, I would say there's a balance between being a show and a sport, which I know you appreciate with your dance background. where it is both. It is art, it is a sport, it is something where you're trying to hopefully get an audience to show up who's not just the parents and the one friend who got roped into showing up, like actually people want to come and see it, and the people aren't coming to see the LED screen or the smoke machines or the spectacle. They're coming to see the athletes, and all of that should be supportive and enhancing, no pun intended, of the athletes. Right.
Yeah.
And so I totally agree. There is definitely such a thing as setting up an LED screen to be distracting, or having camera people actually in the way or running around the athletes, and you're like, hold on, or slowing down or changing the pace of the show because they got to change their memory card or things like that. So I think these are things we need to be aware of, and that are a little more complex. When you've sat behind the judges table, when you've been a judge in the back room, when you've been an athlete on stage, you can see when this does happen, and maybe it's not perfectly synergized. So that is a really, really good counterpoint, Steff. I appreciate you bringing that up. So I want to transition to talking about natural bodybuilding as a whole and some thoughts I have, and to get your guys' feedback. But before I do, I want to make sure that we've given all the shine necessary for WNBF Worlds. Is there anything else that you guys think, from either a competitive standpoint, number of athletes, anything that is worth talking about before we move on?
Yeah. I think the athletes just across the board are getting smarter. So that's really good to see, that people are doing this in ways that will prolong their career, right? Because, usually people don't quit bodybuilding because, a knee, an elbow, like other sports. It's usually something mental, some sort of burnout. So I had a lot of good conversations with all levels. So in both sides of that gradient impressed me. When I speak to someone who's, like really new to this, really young, and, they're talking about, their recovery and how the recovery portion post-prep, and how, they've really thought about this, and they've done their homework, obviously. Like that's comforting. But then also on the freakier side of the sport, like the genetically elite, where it doesn't matter what they do almost. They just need to be consistent. But even them, like there's a lot of things they are doing now, and just how resourceful they are and open to learning from people who don't necessarily look like them. That's pretty cool too, because hey, same thing, right? We're going to get to enjoy these freaks for a little bit longer, because they won't burn out or whatever. So, it's what we do, Eric, right? Like that's our primary thing, is like we want to leave the sport better than how we found it. That's why we started the 3D Muscle Journey, because it was like so frustrating to see the things that were going on locally, and it's like you could be so much better like now if you just looked here instead of there. So it's not just California now, but it's like the whole world. The whole world we're closer to being on the same page. Because again, that's something you see across all sports. It's like there is some sort of unity when it comes to the methods and the principles that the athletes use. So that was real comforting to see.
Yeah, love it. Steff, anything you want to add about Worlds before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, like those kind of goosebump moments as a natural bodybuilder or a natural coach. When you see like a Babacar and an Oscar going head to head in a pro lightweight class, that was just so awesome. That that was one of those kind of moments that you don't get very often, and that's the top of the tree, and it's just incredible for us all who have a celebration of it, just to, because Babacar is like going to turn up, and you've seen him through the year, and we've seen him coming back, but then to see him be challenged by somebody else in a lineup as well, and not just him, there was several. That whole pro lightweight class was just amazing, and the pro middleweight class, as well. They were pro middleweights. The pro lightweight class was awesome too, but the pro middleweights, and I just think those are those wee moments where it's exciting for everybody involved as well, to see where everyone can get to, well, not everyone, but where a lot of people with hard work and time could potentially get to, and for the rest of us to be incredibly inspired by that, I think was fantastic. And even just at the heavyweight level, seeing those results flip. You know, you had like athletes who have been world champions before stand in those lineups again this year and not be pushing in the top 3, which is amazing. And you touched on that with Natalie Hayes in the pro women's bodybuilding class. So it's cool to see previous world champions come back, contend, but the level rising across the board. And I think that the vibe in the room as well between all of athletes from all different cultures was really electric this time round. I felt that there was a lot more communication through the international circuit this year. Obviously, I get to experience that from a promoter level, but just the teams, watching the teams interacting and then seeing them do their after. I think it was Ramon Lineker did some really cool post-stage social media, like just chats to his stories, and just hearing these guys speak about natural bodybuilding from a real sportsman, like a really full-rounded 360 sportsman viewpoint. You know, they might not win, but they're talking about it from a passionate point of view. I think that's so important. You see a lot of people get upset when they lose, but you don't see a lot of people talking about the whole journey and what it means to them and why it's important to continue. And I think that's the well-rounded sportsman sort of narrative that we need to hear more of. And it was great to hear a lot more athletes talking like that at the event, like exactly as what you said, Berto, talking about their journeys. So, yeah, I loved it. I loved a lot of it in terms of people's communication.
Steff, that's actually a perfect transition to what I wanted to talk about. And this is one of the downsides of the fracturing of the iron game that has happened over the last 70 years that none of us in the contemporary time period really have any agency over. This happened starting with, you know, the Wieders and Bob Hoffman fighting in the 50s, right? But today there are some people who are very aware of, say, powerlifting, weightlifting, and bodybuilding, and maybe cross some of those cultural divides. But most people tend to sit in their specific camp. You know, oh yeah, people powerlift. I've heard of that. You know, or yeah, there's a gym that's not like that. I don't train there because they don't have a lap pull downer type of thing. You know, but powerlifting, I think, is probably where we should be looking as natural bodybuilding rather than at one another, because I think we've talked about some of the limitations of vision that exist in certain regions or within our sport. Berto and I's experience of competing in our first show in 2007 in the States, that is still basically the same experience competing in your average amateur natural bodybuilding show in 2024. And I think some of that is from that kind of insular looking and not having the resources to feel like you can do what the NPC or IFBB does. But I don't think that's where we should be looking. I actually think we need to be looking at powerlifting. Powerlifting has had tenfold growth in the last 10 years. Live streams at the smallest local level show are the norm with commentators. They seem to be able to organize things, and they're actually getting huge events, pro circuits. The Sheffield popped up, which kind of became like the Olympia to accompany, you know, the amateur circuit equivalent, where now if you go to Sheffield, you compete, and you're competing for up to 50,000 British pounds. If like the top dog in the women's and the men's side, if you were able to break 3 records, the squat, the bench, the deadlift record, and place first, you're coming away with over $50,000 as a winner. And now starting next year, they're going to have a circuit. So now there's actually maybe 5, 6, 7 money meets that if you're a top level athlete in powerlifting, you can get invited to compete in. And also you can get an SBD or some other company sponsorship where your money, your flights, your accommodation, and your entry fees are all paid for. And if you're good enough, you're potentially winning $10,000+ per year. We're legitimately looking at, maybe not in the West, but athletes who are quite good from weaker economy countries who can live off of the sport. So like Agata Sitko, for example, she's from Poland. She's a professional powerlifter, and in the truest sense. And the insane thing about it, this is the IPF. This isn't the WPO. This isn't the untested. This isn't enhanced powerlifting. This is natural powerlifting, right? And the even more insane thing when you think about it is this isn't people shredded flexing on stage with amazing lighting. You know, what basically it's like, this is what people spend time watching on Instagram is bodies, right? This is people squatting, benching, and deadlifting for 1 rep. And you can't actually even tell how much load's on the bar unless you zoom in a little bit because the plates are so thin. You're like, I don't know, did she squat 170 or 220? I don't know. I need to actually see the number. Oh, now I'm impressed. So to see powerlifting grow and become such a prominent sport that's grown in popularity and that people are actually spectating and that have legitimate sports style commentary, podcasts, multiple podcasts with many listeners listening to it. And to think, why can't we get our shit together as natural bodybuilding? To me, it's because I don't think we're following the right models. One thing that has been historically done in bodybuilding is that the promoters are essentially also your regional affiliates, presenters, and CEOs, CFOs, and it's a few people who are trying to do it all. And thank God for these people because we would not exist without them. But the model in powerlifting, because it is a committee-style actual sporting organization, is that I'll give you an example. So we have New Zealand, our small little country here of 5 million people. All right. We have 5 different regions in New Zealand. So we've got Northland, we've got Auckland, we've got, Waikato, we've got Southern. I think it's either 4 or 5. Each one of those small regions, which in some cases has less than 100,000 people in it, not powerlifters, people, right? They have a couple of powerlifting competitions per year, and they have a volunteer committee that consists of 6 to 8 people at that level. And then we have a New Zealand Powerlifting Federation committee. And that happens in every single country where there's an IPF affiliate. And there's 130. Each one of their regions within their country has a committee, and then the country has a committee, and then the IPF has a committee. All volunteers. We don't have to pay these people because we love what we do, powerlifters and bodybuilders. And one of the things that I think has held back natural bodybuilding, even as we've grown in terms of the internationalness, is that the leadership at the top becomes increasingly more challenging to manage something as it's growing like this. So it's not really huge, I don't believe, in the US or the UK, but the ICN, for example, I Compete Naturally, huge federation in Australasia as a whole, and moving into Europe. They put on shows that have like 900 competitors in Goa and stuff like that, in India and things like that. And they have gigantic shows all over Asia and Australia. People forget they used to be part of the INBA. And the INBA is another one of these examples of an older federation that was run by like a family and kind of small leadership at the top. It's splintered. And now it's the INBA and the ICN. And now we're getting exactly what we don't want in natural bodybuilding is more goddamn federations, right? So I think that is something we need to be very aware of, is that it's quite challenging to have a model that made sense when the sport was smaller and less international, when we're getting to this international scene. And when we see a sport that seems to be growing because its ability to grow is not constrained by its model, is a committee-led organization like the IPF, growing by leaps and bounds. Every time you get a new federation, that's fine. They've got 6 people at their local level to do it. So of course they can handle a live stream. Of course they have a social media manager. Of course they can have commentators. Of course they've got the ability to have, well-trained judges and consistency, because no one is trying to do it on their own. So I would love to get your guys' thoughts. Berto, I'll start with you because I know that you've been involved with powerlifting just as long as I have. We did powerlifting meets in 2007 after we met for the first time in person when we competed at Oakland Tech High School. Only a few months later, we were at Body Tribe, doing our squat, bench, and deadlift competitions for the first time.
Yeah, we did a few of those just backyard powerlifting meets that kind of felt very similar to the bodybuilding. And it wasn't until there was this one meet that opened up my eyes. It was a USPA meet, which I think I don't know if it still exists, or it turned into that other fed now. But I was just shocked as to how organized it was. I wasn't competing. I was there supporting a friend for this one. And I remember, they just had this software up, and you could see where you were in your flights, and there was timers, and like the refs were all dressed up. The equipment was standardized, right? Like you couldn't host the meet unless you had like this sort of bar, this sort of bench. The plates had to be calibrated. I had no idea like 45s, 145s, right? That there's such thing as calibrated plates. It's like another level of specificity. And I remember thinking like, whoa, this is crazy because this is for powerlifting. They're not as type A as us bodybuilders, right? Like we like our things like nice and organized and consistent. And so that got me thinking. And then it wasn't until I got myself, because this was a non-tested fed. Everyone looked a little different than me there. And it was when I started competing in the USAPL, I was like, oh, wow. Like, and right away I'm like, man, this is going to go places because like you said, the leadership was kind of just like broken up. There was someone who was, taking care of, the work in California. And to see it started as this like kind of niche, small little thing. And now it's gotten to the point where it's way bigger than untested powerlifting. Like it's hard to explain because it would make no sense to most bodybuilders. Like how, like why? But I understand why, and this is why I think natural bodybuilding has this immense potential, because if you're around it long enough, and this is how I explain to people that like I really don't look at the IFBB side of things, because like when I was there looking at Babacar and Oscar, is like as freaky as they are, you're like, these are two human beings up there. Like there was something very human about them. Like this is a person. This is like a Homo sapien up there. Whereas like when I see the enhanced side, it's almost like the we grew up when we first started powerlifting. It was like the suited training, right? It was the like with the shirts and the squat suits, and guys would brag about how, I can't even bench 400 raw, but I could do 800 in a bench, like in a bench shirt, and like that was like, he's got skills. But it was just very hard to like quantify that and have that register in your mind. Like you saw it, it was incredible, 800-pound bench press, but there was something synthetic about it. And whereas like with natural bodybuilding, it's like, man, I've seen some world-class long jumps, like, like 25, 26 feet. And to see a human just take off like that, you're like, that is a human being that just did that. And I think natural bodybuilding has the exact same potential, because at a certain point, like when I look on the other side, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I can, because I've been around it long enough, I can kind of see like the person's like stock potential that, they have in there. But there's, again, it's like a bencher to me. Like people, they're very interested in like, what is the actual like human limit? Like what can we do as a species? And natural bodybuilding offers that. So I think it's, as you hinted, it's just as good of a product, because powerlifting meets super niche, man, right? Like I'll stay up and watch them, but like, most people, it just kind of looks like a lot of the same over and over again. Whereas like with like bodybuilding, I don't know, it connects to most people in a different way, because it's muscle, it's lean bodies, it's science, but it's art. It's just so many things wrapped up into one. So I don't know. I'm very optimistic at the end, even though like we're here talking about like, what can be better. Just because the base product is so good. Like I wish more people could see what like Babacar and Oscar did on that day, because like just that alone, if we got that from a few good angles, that would just, they'd have more eyes on like our sport.
Mm-hmm.
Steff, I don't know if you've had much involvement in powerlifting, but I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I haven't. I know a bit about it, and I know where you're coming from, and I think we're touching on that democratic committee-based type system, I think is what we're talking about. I like the idea, and actually one of the affiliates, the WNBF the Italy affiliate, do a more committee-based system. And in some respect, I think like some of us I take the UK, I've got a bunch of incredible internal, I call them, we're an internal team. I have someone who controls all it backstage. I have someone who is collaborative with me, specifically on the social media. So I'm not just, continuously doing it myself. I've got other people involved in the back end, making sure that, all of the paperwork is, for drug testing, etc. I've got 2 specifically doing that. So whilst it's not been we are defining roles in a democratic system, there is a structure, and I have people that make this work. Your kind of positives from that, I would say, would be your collective decision making. So it's more us making those decisions together with equal participation rather than one says all. Like, the disadvantage of that, I think, would be slower decision making. Sometimes when something needs to be done, it takes much longer to be executed. There's potential for more conflict if only one person's at the helm and everyone else is trying to, have their say. So I think the increased collaboration idea is one I support, because the more there's a lot of people with different skill sets that we bring to the table, and where one person is, it's like with any business, where one person is a numbers guy, another person is, the diplomatic confidant between something else. The two are not the same. It's very, very different. So we do need to utilize the different minds within the organizations, or even breaking that down to the affiliates themselves, and recognize where the skills can be best utilized to make a really smooth running operation, so that, exactly as you mentioned with your meet, you train up at the meet and you see the scoreboards going up, you see the times being kept on time, you see that someone's dealing with tech, you see that someone's dealing with social media, so that everything is covered and it's all working very well together. As the growth of anything happens, you can't, well, I certainly wouldn't believe that I'd be able to do all of that just myself. It would be too difficult to manage. But it would also, I feel, would result in stunting my ability to diversify and grow. So there's those additional things that I think could be done better without me potentially being leading it in some way or another. So I do agree. I think like that kind of system works very well, whether it is set down and formally organized. On the flip side of that, though, you are looking for people who are loyal enough and will give their time up enough from a volunteer perspective to these organizations. It is a labor of love, I call it, running a show. And you said something at the very start, Berto, which I completely and utterly synergize with, which is, doing this keeps you up at night. It does. It's like, you live, breathe, sleep, repeat. And certainly in the position I'm in, I'm constantly thinking, how can we better the WNBF UK? How can I offer my services more on a global front to help my leaders, the guys who've given me this opportunity, Bob and Tina? How can I help better the whole organization so that we can all continue to push forwards? And it is certainly a labor of love, and you're banking on involving other people in that that share the same passions that you do, that are willing to give up a lot of their free time, a lot of their mind on certain problem solving. Shout out to a couple of my guys, Stuart and Sarah, and my team. They are incredible. Without them, I don't think I could do a lot of things that I'm doing without their support. So it definitely is a good system, and I think we need to explore that on a global front as well as affiliates to pull ranks and better the organisation as a whole.
Steff, I literally have had 2 dreams now, a repeated dream now. Counts of them twice, where I have been dreaming at night. I'm on my laptop, I'm in a Google document, and I'm writing up the WNBF technical rules. So one thing that is well known in the IPF is they have the IPF technical rules. They republish it every year. They are absurdly detailed as to the level of things they cover, what types of shoes you can have, where you can stand on the platform if you're a coach within the coach's box. Okay, the technical controller looks you over to make sure that your singlet doesn't cross your knee sleeves before you walk on the platform. All right, you're going to get a red card, a blue card, or a white card, and they each mean these things. To become a referee for powerlifting, there's 4 levels, and you have to take a test. There's the level of detail is stuff that I'm like, we need this for the WNBF, because the judging standards are different well, they're not supposed to be, but they are enacted and interpreted differently when you go to different regions. And I think we need more than like a PowerPoint and a kind of a basic understanding. And I judged on this panel as a test judge once. Like, one of the things that I've been passionate about lately in my head and wanting to contribute, and I have no time to do this, to be clear. I have like 5 jobs. But I would still do it because it does keep me up at night. And this stuff, it makes me, I want to see the legitimacy, the transparency, and the growth that natural bodybuilding can have occur. I think sometimes people might see my thoughts or my perspective as critical, but not having maybe a willingness or skin in the game, or, oh, like, it's easy for you to do that. You're not a promoter. You're not doing this. And I hope people know, like, I love this stuff. Like, I am so motivated to help and improve that I think, I know, and I know I'm not alone, I guess is what I'm saying, that I'm sure it can be intimidating from someone's like, oh, I know how to run a show. I know how things want to go. And now I'm going to have like 8 people make a collective decision. But it's not like we got to run a country. We don't need to vote on things. There's politics, but they're not the same. And it really just comes down to many hands make quick work. And you're right. Some people are excellent at understanding others, and they can be the emotionally intelligent face. They can perhaps know how to say things online in a way that will communicate something without unnecessarily triggering people. Someone else might be an engineer in their real job outside of lifting weights, and they would be like, no, I've got a great system that we can use for X, Y, and Z. And you see that in powerlifting. All those different minds come together, and we have things like someone just creates the program that enables us to change attempts. And one really cool thing is Open Powerlifting. It's just this database online where you can look up all the meet results that go all the way back to the dawn of powerlifting. And you can see, like, I can look up Eric Helms Open Powerlifting, and I can look at that actual meet that Berto and I talked about in 2007 and see what I squat, benched, and deadlift, or at least what the third attempts were to get to my total, because some of those from that old, you don't have great records. And like right now, we don't know. Like, I don't know how to go and find out who won WNBF Worlds in like 2005. I know because I was there. I can find Brian Whitaker's website, but it's not, we don't have some of these things that to me are inherent to a professionalized sport, and the fact that we're moving towards that is really good. And I'm encouraged by that. That's why I'm talking about it so much, not just critical, because I see the other countries, they've got their WNBF UK or Italy or Spain or Taiwan jumpers on. They are so motivated. They feel like they're a collective unit, and they're going to Worlds to compete. And I'm like, oh man, we got to get a WNBF USA, because to a lot of people in the US, WNBF Worlds is just a big show, but they don't have that camaraderie within the team of, oh, we've qualified and now we're going to go. And I see all these opportunities to make it truly become a sport that you feel like you're participating in. So I know I sound critical, but I am more so here because I want to provide perspective and ideas that hopefully the hardworking people like yourself, and also you, Berto, as the athlete representative, people may not know that you are the WNBF athletes for Up on the men's side, can actually, carry these things forward. But yeah, I'm ultimately, I'm very encouraged, even though I might sound critical as well. So, yeah.
I think, like, even that there, the athlete commission that Berto, you're on, and we started this up this year, the WNBF athlete commission, is great. It's it's showing that willingness and listening to all avenues of the organization, and especially the athlete. What the athlete wants more of, what the constructive critique is to help internally make things better. And yeah, what you're touching on there is the sort of archiving system of the years and years of the incredible journey of the natural talent, and showing the progression of the sport right from its inception to now. That would be super cool to have something like that, that we could flip back on and see what happened in 2002 in comparison to, the likes of the modern day now. I think certainly the way in which the landscape is evolving, and it's so, the changes year on year right now to the landscape is quite, it's kind of scary at the same time as it's pushing everyone to have more and more conversations about this stuff as well. As keeping ahead of what's going on, seeing the other federations, I suppose, open up these natural doors to shows that are now posing slightly different problems or perhaps questions on why, how, what does that look like, as it unravels. This is the most important time to be making those internal changes and certainly making things better. And I think we have been up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a element of pace now needed for these certain changes to occur, kind of like the world is changing so fast. Changes within your businesses or your organizations or your brands need to change reasonably fast as well. So, and that puts an element of pressure, right, on all of us to try and do things in the best way possible, as long as the intent there is true and it's right for whatever you're doing.
Steff, I'm going to say it straight up. It's adapt or die time. And that sounds dire, but the reality is that on the enhanced side of the sport, there hasn't been a little bit of fracturing there as well. I've talked about this previously, how the IFBB International split from the NPC and IFBB Pro League. But the IFBB Pro League and NPC are still very, very big, very, very dominant in North America, and very, very organized, and frankly, pretty good business people. Not necessarily always coloring within the lines business people, but pretty effective business people, I'll say it that way. And they're coming. They're here. And they announced big plans, and people that weren't really listening, like, oh, we're going to have a national show in every state. Okay, cool. Yeah, whatever. Yep, they're doing that now. Oh, we're going to have a natural Olympia qualifier, or a qualifier for the Olympia. You go to Ben Weider's Naturals. Now you can actually get an Olympia qualification. Now they've clarified that more. You can do that if you win the pro division outside of bodybuilding. So they're going, hey, yeah, the open bodybuilding class, we're not expecting drug-free guys to go over there and do very well. But hey, classic, men's physique, bikini, the women's divisions, if you're able to be the best of the best, you get a natural pro card, you compete in a natural pro division, you win the overall, you can go compete at the Olympia. And the prestige and the draw from that, I think, can't be ignored, because before natural bodybuilding, there was just bodybuilding. And there was a time that all bodybuilding was natural, because there was a time before anabolic steroids. And the IFBB has been around for a very, very long time. And I think because of all of those things that have been done effectively, archiving, promotion, bigger money, bigger shows, people are still fans of bodybuilding at large. We all watch Pumping Iron coming up, right? Like, people want to go, oh, I want to step on the same stage as Samir Bannout, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Frank Zane, Iris Kyle. Like, the opportunity to go that route is very attractive. And the only thing that I would say they're missing right now is actually tapping into the realness of natural bodybuilding. Right now, it's a 3-year drug-free. How consistent is the testing? Are they really taking this serious? That's the big question. And when you look at posts about the way that the NPC worldwide is doing their natural bodybuilding, all the comments are relatively negative about that. Some are positive. But I think the fact that those shows are growing and that they understand that market, I do think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And I mean, why not create multiple divisions of different years drug-free if you start implementing polygraphing? There's a lot of things that could be done if you're thinking about, from a pure business perspective, how do I grow natural bodybuilding? Which I don't think is the perspective that natural bodybuilding traditional organizations take, because it is for the love of the sport, the passion, and what we think is best. Nor do I think it's what we should take, but we need to be very aware of what would be the best business move, what would create the fastest growth, even if we don't decide to go that route, because it'll at least tell you that's what they're going to do. And I think we're at a pivotal point in time where we make those faster business decisions. We keep pace with the changing times, like you said, Steff, or we're maybe half a decade away from having a very clear, dominant natural bodybuilding federation called the NPC and the IFBB. that we may or may not believe is natural, or we may not like it, or we may have moral objection to it, or personal thoughts on it. But the reality would be is that the majority of natural bodybuilders are going to compete there because it does all the things that we've talked about, and they do it faster, they do it better. And I think that is a reality that is very possible and that we need to be mindful of. And it is, in my opinion, there's no, I got some things going on, we're going to wait a couple of years and then we can get on top of this. Or, well, I don't have time to both create an archive and production quality. I just need to focus on this. Well, that's why you need a committee, you know? So I think it is time to make big changes, or we're going to be relegated to being seen as kind of the farm leagues of the thing that we started, you know? So I think that's my perspective. I don't know. Do you guys think I'm Chicken Little saying that the sky is falling, or do you think that's a real potential possibility? Berto, what do you think?
Yeah. They just have a real powerful template to work off of. They just have to repeat that process, like under the guidelines of natural bodybuilding. But that's kind of scary, man. And although they have, I guess, they have that sort of leverage. I think the one thing that gives me hope right now is you're always limited to like what your personnel is, like who you have, right? Bad personnel, it's like, I really can't do anything with this restaurant because like my servers and cooks suck, right? But that's not our case. And I think that personnel lends further than we even think sometimes. The athletes and the quality of the athletes, like that's the most important thing, right? It's like if the game sucks, who cares, right? If they look like what, I guess a lot of the bodybuilding world thinks like natural bodybuilders look like, right? It's like a amateur, like collegiate swimmer, right? If that were the case, okay, bad news bears, right? But that's not it, right? We saw that last weekend, right? So we have that. And then it's just so crazy how many people outside of like the immediate ecosystem have a love and a passion for bodybuilding. And it's as simple as like putting out the bat signal and being like, yo, we need, like, it's crazy. Like, I don't know if you need lawyers. I guarantee you there's a lawyer out there who loves natural bodybuilding. Like, say somewhere in the US, it's like, bro, I've been following you, Eric Helms, for like since 2009. I still, rock with your stuff. Let me help.
But you gotta be willing to put out the bat signal. Exactly. That is the thing that I'm like, come on, let's go. But I'll shut up. You continue, Berto.
No, and I mean, and the NPC isn't keen on this either, because like remember you guys had that podcast with Guillermo, right? And he's like, he's there trying to help out because you have no paramedics. Like, you need paramedics given the nature of the sport, right? There's a reason why the open bodybuilders go up first, because like we don't want these guys to like pass out, right? Crazy, but like I don't think anyone followed up on that.
Yeah, that was a one-man show. He came to them, I want to do this, and they were like, okay, but I don't want you to be too visible. Like, I don't want people to see the fact that we have, medical professionals here, because then they're going to think the sport's dangerous. And he's like, the sport is dangerous. That's why I'm here. And he's like, yeah. So, no, you're 100% right.
Yeah. So, like, even they have their little, like, blind spots. But I think that's the one thing that, like, we have going. And this is just me being biased, but usually the people who gravitate towards drug-free sports, they tend to be like pretty well-rounded and skillful in other areas of their life, right? Like, how many people have we competed with? It's like, oh, dude, you're a doctor, and you're this, you're that. So the talent pool is out there in regards to people who would be willing to just give up their time and help keep the sport going. Because it always surprises me, man. Like you would think people who are doing pretty important things with their life, right? That is like, well, you fell in love with this thing too? I thought it was like some weird infatuation that I just like took too far. So it's out there. and especially in the US, it's out there. We just, like you said, Eric, we just need to put out the bad signal, and be surprised. You probably have more inquiries that you can handle.
So, Berto, it sounds like you actually think, despite the fact, actually, I would say it's even a sign that the NPC is getting involved in natural bodybuilding, that despite this kind of quote unquote threat, natural bodybuilding is in a pretty damn good spot right now. Like, we're talking about the international growth. We're talking about how Worlds keeps leveling up. We're talking about how the middleweights this year between Oscar and Babacar may be more impressive in the overall battle. And man, last year, Frederick Gibson and Benjamin Schuster thought, oh my God, these guys, they were slightly better in the overall battle. No way it can get better than that. Probably would have been third and fourth this year, guys, which blows my mind. So we're in a good spot overall. There's reason to be optimistic, not just afraid of the NPC coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the base product is great. It's great. It's overall, because it's very, again, robust all the way into the amateurs. Like, now is the time, right? And thankfully, like, given, what's happening right now, it's like we're well equipped to make some moves.
Mm-hmm.
I love that message. Stephanie, I want to hear from you. Let's tell me, is the sky falling? Do I need to be concerned? What, leave us with the sobering perspective from the blunt person from the UK, because I know you're going to give us the real deal. What is your perspective?
I mean, I think, like all of these topics, we're all in our bubble, in our area, in our zone, right? And we're hearing things in different ways. Like, how you guys perceive the IFBB NPC, how that's kind of coming out in America is going to be kind of different to how I experience it over here in the UK. And I'm actually really optimistic. I see what's going on. I see them extending the arm into the natural realms. I actually see it as, okay, you're wanting a bite of the natural cherry, if you like. You notice that this is actually, a growing side of the sport. It's incredibly, we've got a lot of passionate people, a lot of great talent, including a lot of the IFBB pros themselves. Coming back to WNBF, that was a complete example of that this year. But over here, the reputation of some of the IFBB and the NPC, not everywhere, just a lot of things that we see, is all about the excessive giving out of pro cards and how that's not looking too great. The real dangers to health that we're now seeing annually in terms of deaths and really negative effects from being on that side of the sport. And more influencers, just like who are speaking about natural bodybuilding, are talking a lot about the downsides of being on that side of the sport also. And I think, they're diversifying. They are good business people. They have got a great business model. They are diversifying as we should be on our side of the sport. And it's like, I think one of the biggest things is, because we all, again, going back to the labor of love, it's a passion, even for them and a lot of their people, maybe not at the top, but underneath, who are all running these different affiliates across the globe. We're all very heightened, very passionate, very emotively fueled by what we're doing. So there is an element for me to take out the emotion completely from it and see it completely as it is and simplify it and do essentially like a competitive analysis. Okay, they're going down the natural route. What does that mean? What can we identify as their main reasons for doing that? Is it just money oriented, or is there a need and want to saturate the natural market because they're passionate about natural bodybuilding? I don't personally think it's the latter. I think it's the former. So I think it's finding out, what are their motivations for it, and what are the areas in our side of the sport that are growing, and focus solely on that. Because if we do too much spending our time focusing on that, we're not internally focused on bettering the sport from the inside out. I think there's plenty of room for more than one organisation. I don't think necessarily that they're going to overtake the natural realm. I don't think that's ever going to happen, personally. But I do think it's important that you recognise that there is a competitor there. So therefore, we have to do something about analysing what that looks like, and then putting the right amount of work into making sure that natural bodybuilding stays true natural bodybuilding, and putting the clear emphasis on the backbone of the sport, the integrity of the sport, the length of time we've been here, the drug testing, why that matters, what it means to be a natural bodybuilder from the ground up, And I think there's a lot of people that are so passionate about that now, that are really banging that drum, that are sticking up for natural bodybuilding, and all these comments and all these posts that, we've seen it. We've probably all seen it. 3 years, what's that? You've seen all these kinds of comments coming in about, we'll believe it when we see it. And so they've got a lot of work to prove to the natural community that they're even legitimate in the first place. And that takes a lot of time and effort. So those are my thoughts on it.
No, that's great. And I think that's a perfect place for us to end. And I'll some thoughts I had on both of your guys' comments. The fact that what we probably is a mostly pure business move is occurring should tell us about the marketability, the popularity, and the interest in natural bodybuilding, which is ultimately a good thing. And you're right. Berto, you said this before. You don't win a 100-meter sprint looking in the lanes next to you. But you do 100% analyze what's going on, and you take the things that make sense. You identify the weaknesses and go, oh, we don't want to make that mistake. And then you come back and you implement a strategy and you plan. You get organized, and you make some intelligent, reasoned, non-emotive moves. And I think there is a will to do that, and there's certainly a right market for it. So I think the summary there that I took from that is that natural bodybuilding is in a good spot. And the fact that there are these discussions of, oh, who's going to take the market, means there's a market. And you're right. There is elements to natural bodybuilding that are pretty critical. The desire for something that you can feel proud about and not have to talk around to your grandmother, to not have to worry about drawing a line in the sand based upon where your ethics or your concerns for health are with your desire to be a bodybuilder. I do think I have far more in common with the typical enhanced bodybuilder than I do the typical person lifting weights. We're both crazy. We're just drawing a line in a different place. And I appreciate and I love the fact that the natural bodybuilding community exists. So I don't have to make that choice in a way that makes at least part of me feel conflicted, or that I have to make a sacrifice to the same degree that someone who is enhanced does. And the fact that that's growing, I think, is really important, because it gives more people that opportunity, and it's a really positive, important thing. And it kind of makes you think more long-term about competition, health, who am I, why do I lift, all these really important things that we cover here at Iron Culture. So I want to say a huge thank you to you both for taking your time and sharing your thoughts. And I really hope all the listeners who are passionate about natural bodybuilding understand that everything we've said, whether it's positive or a little bit critical, is because we want to see the best for the sport. And I really just want to say a big thank you to everyone who actually makes this sport happen. Without the stage, without people like you, Steff, putting on shows, organizing and stepping up and volunteering their time, energy, and hard work, we don't have this at all. So it is easy, for us to level criticisms. But I want to make sure there's the other side of the coin, where it doesn't mean there's an intense and continuing gratitude for the fact that we have what we have. So thank you both very much. Any final words that either one of you guys say before we sign off? I'll take that as a solid no. And I didn't even listen to my producer who said, direct your questions to a specific person, Eric. You've been podcasting for like half your life, and you still can't just say Berto or Steff afterwards. No, honestly. Thank you both so much for coming on. Everyone, this has been another episode of Iron Culture presented by Mass. We need your support, so make sure that you're smashing the like button, whether you're watching this on YouTube. That's the YouTube for Iron Culture or YouTube for Mass Office Hours, that you're giving us a 5-star rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, and enjoy this episode sometime before the end of 2024. I don't know when it's coming out, but our next episode will be on the very next insert date here. Thank you for your time, and I can't wait to talk to you next week.